Hello and a very warm welcome to this special panel discussion focused on the topic of startups and MSMEs for India's indigenization dream. As you know, drones can be used for surveillance or aerial photography, spraying of pesticides on farms, and many other purposes. Similarly, rockets can put satellites into space. 3D printing machines can make different parts and technologies that can solve the problem of connectivity by beaming high bandwidth internet from space. These are some of the innovations that India's startup ecosystem has been exploring, which could have far-reaching impact on India's indigenous capabilities. In this panel discussion, we will explore the role that startups and MSMEs in India's indigenization dream and the support ecosystem that we need to provide them. To enlighten on this, I am joined by Ms. Deepthi Ravula, COE Hub, Government of Telangana, Mr. Amit Jindal, co-founder, Felix Advisory, PMG-Apiary, COE Blockchain, STPI. So let me begin with Ms. Deepthi. COVID-19 pandemic has severely impacted various sectors. In your view, how do startups help in mitigating the challenges with their innovative ideas and solutions?
Thank you so much, Ankush, for the question. And I think it's a very pertinent topic because, we are now recovering from the pandemic and we are actually in a newer world that is, again, I will not say the new normal, but it's a very different world from what it was in 2020. Coming down to the entire, how did the startups navigate the challenges or how did they help? I think how we survived during the pandemic is a real example of actually how startups helped us. So, our day started with Big Basket, our day went with Swiggy, Zomato, and so much more. I think they became the lifeline for so many of us who could, for many of the elderly people who could not go out, for so many people that, did not have an opportunity to go out and even meet their daily needs. That is one thing that we've noticed. The second thing also, education. See, in India, there was a lot of conversation around in 2019. There was so much conversation around digital transformation that we were talking about. But I think 2020, 21 accelerated and actually put it transformation into overdrive. And startups are actually leading from front. I don't think there can be a bigger example of how innovate. And also in terms of so many ventilators, so much masks, so many different things that were needed for us to collectively fight against COVID. Startups have been at the forefront and they will continue to lead the way as we transition from post-pandemic world to the newer geopolitical world that we are dealing with today. Startups will forever be leading the charge, and that we've noticed. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So coming to Mr. Jindal, could you share your thoughts on, as Ms. Deepthi talked about, how startups totally revolutionized the sector and how they came in front when the situation was, when the chips were really down and situation were really bad in India, and how they came up with new innovative ideas and supported the ecosystem. So what was your experience?
So thank you so much, Ankush, for the kind introduction and welcome to all the viewers. So definitely COVID-19 have impacted the various sectors of our industry, and COVID-19 have teach us to work digitally and become more dependent on the digital work. Technology is playing an important role in our industry. It's impacting each and every sector of our industry, and no sector have remained immune. And with the new innovative ideas which have been built by the startup, we are highly dependent on our startups. Because of working more on the dependency on the technology side, there are certain risks and gaps which come arising because of dependency on technology. So I want to share certain examples. What are the gaps which are there and how the startups are playing important role on that thing. So whenever we start working on the technology or on the digital front, the first thing we need to do, open up account on the website or on application. And there the role of a KYC comes, a digital KYC we have to upload. And as per the World Bank report, in 2019 only, $5 trillion fraud happened because of the digital KYC issues. Out of 7.8 billion population of the earth, 1 billion population doesn't have any legal digital identity. 3.2 billion population have the legal identity, but they lack the digital trail. As for the World Bank report, if we bring each person on the earth on the proper legal digital identity, it has the potential to increase the GDP by 3% to 13% by 2030 as per the respective countries. Every year, the bankings are spending $500 billion on doing the KYC. Now, the startups, this is an opportunity for the startup where the startups like Onfido, Civic, or My Earth ID have created a digital identity solutions on the blockchain technology, which are solving these problems and these opportunities which are be availed by the startups. Another example which we can discuss, COVID-19, which we have faced, and there was a big problem on distribution of the vaccine. And out of one vaccine gets lost into the supply chain mechanics. And the startup, the Hyderabad startup, like started with the help of the UNICEF, have created a distribution ledgers on the blockchain technology to trace these vaccination distribution. So because of the COVID-19, they have been impacted. This is impacting various sectors also, but they are creating a lot of opportunities also for our startups to avail this startup with these help the new technology. They are able to do a wonderful job and helping the growth in the economy. Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Jindal, you shared a lot of examples on how startups came into being and some of the very interesting examples that you have given. So any of you, Mr. Jindal or Ms. Deepthi, could share some of the gaps that you actually started your conversation with, and what kind of gaps are these, and are these gaps related to funding, incentives, and policy? What kind of policy can be offered to minimize these challenges? So please share your thoughts on these.
So definitely startup is playing an important role for the growth of the economy. If you're gonna see the data also, in 1900, the top companies of the world were always from the US, be it Microsoft, Google, Alphabet, Facebook. And suddenly in 1990s, China started the ecosystem, and the companies like Tencent, Alibaba came into the top 10 companies of the world. And with this, seeing the growth of the economy with the startup, and Modi government have introduced Startup Indian missions in 2015. And the startups are playing important role for the growth of the economy. In India only, we have now 81 unicorns, which out of which 44 came last year, and we're expecting 50 more unicorns in 2022. With this, we understand the growth and development of the economy with the help of the startup. But saying that there are certain gaps which we are seeing and which need to be fulfilled with the help of our government or ecosystem. I can divide this thing into broadly to 2-3 options. First is on the funding side, which you mentioned. Definitely, still the startups are facing problems in raising the funds. A lost startup, which is making loss, can't raise the funds from the banking sides.
Yeah.
And just to give an example, vis-a-vis in US and Singapore, there are private banks are also participating in giving funds to the startups, or there are funds, endowment funds from the universities, which are participating into the funds which are are being invested to the startups, or there are pension funds outside India which are investing to the startup. So saying that if we collaborate these all options, they can help definitely in boosting these startup funding options. Second, from the taxation perspective, there are still challenges for the startups, which every sector have to align with the whole vision of Mr. Modi government. Saying that there are section 68, 69 of the income tax act, which says the startup have to get all the sources of his funding, which means whatever investment they are raising, whatever loan they are raising, they have to get all the records of their investors, be it the lender or be it investor. They have got to get to all the financials, PAN and details of that investors or the lenders. And that is a bit challenges for the startup, and the investors or lenders are not ready to share those information which the government is asking, or the income tax department is asking. So that we need to align with the whole mission of government of India. Thirdly, on the regulatory sides, there are certain challenges which I'm seeing which we can be improvised. Just to give an example, on the alternate investment fund, AI funds, which helps in investing into startups, still there is a requirement. If the investor is coming from outside India, he have to take a PAN in India and have to file the income tax returns. So a lot of investors does not want to do that thing. They don't want to go in compliance in India. Vis-a-vis in Singapore, there are not such restriction in Singapore. If we can avoid these kind of things and can give way to get more funding from outside India, that will help the startup ecosystem. So in a nutshell, from whole perspective, we need to get aligned with the whole mission to sustain or take our startup ecosystem to the next level. Yeah, thanks.
So, Ms. Deepthi, as Mr. Jindal talked about some of the challenges, starting from raising of funds or the taxation or complex regulatory systems, or how some of these overseas investors are facing challenges in India. So what has been your experience, and could you shed light on this, and what kind of challenges are there, and where does India stand in terms of opening up or sorting some of these challenges away?
So, I mean, it was really nice to hear Mr. Jindal speak about so many of the challenges that are there and opportunities for governments to work on. But one of the key things also, I think what we've noticed over the past couple of years is that there is a lot of ad hoc support that is there. Yes, we have the entire ecosystem in place, but there is still this conversation around having, very ad hoc support. I think one of the biggest things that the ecosystem itself, the ecosystem of government, incubators, innovation partners, corporates, and also VCs, we all need to come together to make sure that, there's an end-to-end support that is given to a startup. And the second thing also is that the pandemic also has taught us one more thing, is that funding is number 3 of the problems that the startups face. Relevance of an idea in the market, the customer being there, and availability of talent are the bigger challenges. And I think their governments have a big role to play, and that is something I think we all need to solve better. And the third thing also is that we talk a lot about policy, right? So there's not a lot of evangelism around getting these entrepreneurs or want to be entrepreneurs to understand how to be eligible for that policy. And I mean, I don't know if you're familiar, but working capital is a bigger problem, more than loan, more than VC investment, whatever else. The initial bridge funding that is needed as an entrepreneur is going from, yes, I can do it, to let us make it a company. There is that a sweet period. That is actually the biggest barrier to many of these startups who can actually become, SMEs and become job creators. If we can bridge that better, then the world is an oyster for every startup founder there is in India. And last and most important thing is that we glorify jugaad a lot. I feel that is the one more thing we need to stop. The reason I say this is because when we talk about a rural entrepreneur creating something, we immediately go into this jugaad mindset. That means we go into this empowerment mindset. We don't realize that a person with few resources has been so resourceful. And we need to make sure that, if somebody's doing something, how do we give them better access to tools rather than saying he's done a jugaad invention? So I think we need to democratize entrepreneurship better between urban and rural. And I think that is the biggest game changer that India can actually have, so that more and more and more and more entrepreneurs can be born in every part of India, not just from the, the hubs of India. But of course, yeah, that is one thing I would like to really highlight, because jugaad is really killing innovation, I feel.
Yeah, we have to think beyond shortcuts.
Yes. No. I'm not saying it's not about shortcuts, Ankush. What I'm trying to get at is we tend to undermine some brilliant initiatives, and we kind of limit many innovators by just saying that, they did a jugaad invention.
He has got it done by some
who can try to scale them better. So when somebody's done something with the few things that they have, imagine if we give them an entire toolbox, what they can achieve. So I think that support. Shortcuts are great, but the point is, how do we do that better? How do we make sure that, it becomes a product which stands in the market by itself? Because, somebody making a product with few resources is making it for people like them. So that is a product which can scale to 1 billion, and that is something we need to work on better.
That's a very valid point. So, Mr. Jindal, would you like to share your thoughts on this? How we can basically empower these individuals in the nook and corners of the country, and uplift them to a level where they can support the country in a larger way?
No, I totally agree with the Deepthi. The first primary thing is on the innovations. Every startup you will say me too. So they are copying the idea, and the focus should be on the incentives on the innovation side, saying that there are certain incentives by the government of India also under Section 80IC, where they provide 3 tax consecutive years as a tax holiday out of 10 years.
Yeah.
So there are things which have been done by the government of India, which the startup have to understand. There are incentive schemes by the central government also, and there are state-specific schemes which they can avail by just doing working on hardly on the innovation side. Yeah.
Absolutely. So as we have discussed about the gaps and challenges and how we can actually empower these people and what is the central messages behind these, let's go back to where all it has started and catapulted the government. So union government is trying to indigenize many critical productions in the country, and there is growing focus on promoting homegrown startups. So along with the defense sector, what are the key sectors that can have a far-reaching impact on the agility and scalability offered by the startups? So could you share your thoughts on some of these sectors that can be actually looked into and promoted?
Sure. So So basically, definitely the movement which have been started by the government of India, self-sustainability, and there are other sectors which can also be seen, like now government is focusing definitely on the defense sector or the mobile industry, but there are other more sectors which I believe the government will be working sooner on those things. One of the key sectors I see is the EV sector, where government have given the state subsidies, but still we see there are chances where we can increase certain incentives for the manufacturing of this hub. So as a whole, this is a $1,400 billion industry as on date, and this will go to $15,000 billion by 2027. So there's huge potential opportunity in India, and to become self-sustained into EV side, I believe the central government should think more on the manufacturing side, how we can give more incentives to these manufacturers and make them more sustainable. Second thing which I want to tell, there are new things which is happening across the world, and government should see those things. Just to give an example, into the real estate side, the concept of fraction ownership is going on. It started in 1990 in US, where they introduced the concept of fraction ownership, where 5-6 people can own single property and can enjoy the property. And there are certain tax and regulatory implications which US have stated how to utilize those assets through 5-6 people and get the benefits. And this helps the real sector for a boom, where the unsold inventory can be sold with these individual contributors, and that the world is moving to the sharing economy. So I believe these kind of things, if India also adopts, so still there is no regulation in India where the concept of fraction ownership is there. Into the tax or regulatory side, can I get those regulations in India into taxation and regulatory side, where I can move to the sharing economy concept and help these real estate sector to boom, the infrastructure to boom with these new methods to share economy and to hold these assets.
Yeah, thank you. So Ms. Deepthi, Mr. Jindal talked about EV sector opportunity, the $15,000 billion opportunity by 2027, which is waiting for everybody. And so could you, in your perspective, could you share some of the key initiatives in the startup ecosystem that we need to put in place that might help bridge the gap and accelerate India's startup dream?
Yeah. So one of the, I think Mr. Jindal covered the most pertinent topics related to what is coming. And I'll speak from a very government of Telangana perspective. So in Telangana, we've identified 14 focus sectors, which include textiles, manufacturing, electronics, EV, aerospace, defense, life sciences, pharma. All of these are important because, again, I'm sorry to be going back to the years we all want to forget, but that has actually shown us that there's an immense need to kind of do a lot more manufacturing in-house. So while we talk about all these things, how do we create an ecosystem which can actually do competent manufacturing? How do we produce more raw materials? How do we create the supply chain stronger? Is, I think, something that we all need to work on, irrespective of which sector we choose. And the next thing also is that how do we make sure that, we create companies of not tomorrow, but day after tomorrow, right? How do we make sure that these are not just IoT 4.0, but these guys actually make sure that, they are ready for industry 4.0 and make sure that, these guys can actually scale up to be able to manufacturing everything. Small example. So there are some manufacturing units here in Hyderabad, and they manufacture televisions for one big brand from Southeast Asia. And very oddly, when we had gone for a visit to them, they were actually importing these, these thermocol things that actually come as a shield for your TV in the box. They were importing that from China because injection molding at that scale was not there here. So what I'm trying to get at is, if we need to kind of to enable more startups to get into whichever sector that they choose, we need to strengthen our manufacturing. And that includes every level of manufacturing. If you do that, I think we are on a great state. Yeah.
So thanks a lot. And so that was Ms. Deepthi's perspective. So Mr. Jindal, could you share more light on that, and what do you think about it?
No. So definitely, I agree on Deepthi what she's saying. Each sector is playing an important role, and we need to create that ecosystem. And with the help of each sector is dependent on the other sector. And I believe we are in the fourth industrial revolution where technology is playing a critical role. So we, as per the World Economic Reports, also we have to dependent on these new technology, blockchain, AI, AR, VR, and you have to utilize these blend of technology along with these sectors and have to work on all these sectors to grow as a whole.
Yeah. And can we compare some of these developed countries or developing countries where the startup ecosystem, like Germany or Australia, where the startup ecosystem is relatively stronger, or as they have started it from even before when we started into this? So can we compare it and see where we are actually lacking and what kind of strategies we can build? Because COVID has in itself, has brought a lot of challenges. And a lot of people who were really doing well, and now they are really struggling. And so that gives a very wrong example to those youngsters who really want to be in this space, but they think that, okay, I don't know, I have no clue about the future for the next 3 years. So why should I put my hard-earned money into something which may not work?
Yeah. So basically, we're going to see we have reached among the third largest ecosystem in the startup in the world. Saying that definitely there are certain challenges which we are facing, like what we are seeing the startups after a first round or second round, they are flipping the structure and moving out of India. And then definitely, as you rightly said, we have to compare what these developed countries are providing, which India is not providing, what are the challenge gaps which are there, and we have to work on. So just to give an example, R&D, research and development side, which is the key sector for any startup or any manufacturing site, the first thing we have to do on the R&D side. Saying that in India, there are credits, which means given by the state side, and there are 100% reduction which have been given by India to promote R&D. But let's compare this thing with the Singapore. Singapore is giving a 250% reduction on the R&D side. They are also giving cash credits on the R&D side. So these kinds of incentive, if we can see why people are moving to Singapore, these are certain lucrative things which Singapore is contributing on the R&D side or on the IP side or on the funding side from the private banking sides. So we have to work on those sides to at least work. So we should avoid these startups should not move out of Singapore and remain in India. So I think we have to work on these things. Yeah.
Yeah. So one last question I would like to ask out of my curiosity. So what is the strength of India as you see, because you have been studying a lot of global use cases. So what is the strength of India? Where can we focus more, be it manpower, cheap manpower, or the kind of infrastructure that we have and the availability of products? We have talked a lot about challenges. So let's end this with our strength, our core strength, and where India as a country, we can focus.
I think, Ankush, you actually touched upon it very briefly. I think the strength of India, and it's the true thing. It's actually in its people. So we are one of the youngest populations in the world, right? And that is actually the most valuable asset India actually has. And the second important thing is that how do we make sure that we kind of create this population, the young people, to actually not just think of like, sectors or skills, but more in terms of think about how do we create this next generation of young people to create products which can actually scale for the world. That is number one. Second thing also is that the industriousness of the people that we have here, I think that is something which is very undermined. See, one of the interesting things is that we glorify all the CEOs who went out of India and became CEOs there, but we never celebrate the amazing people who have actually built companies here. I think if we actually create more role models here, that actually also is a big asset for us. We don't celebrate our own entrepreneurs enough. That is the second thing. I think we have a lot of brilliant entrepreneurs who are there. And the third important asset that India actually has is how agile we are. I think, our resilience and agility is something that we don't capture enough. And I think this is the third thing. And last and most important thing is that the focus that the state and central governments have been able to put, and the convergence that is happening between, if you talk about any other country, there are different mechanisms there because the populations are different. But in India, in spite of having so many differences in terms of so many different things, right? Politics, religion, there's so many things that are happening. I think the convergence that is happening when it comes towards innovation and entrepreneurship, I think between the state and the center, is something that we need to capitalize better. And last and most important thing is that, every state is trying to compete with each other to be the best state in India to do business with. So I think if we move from that competition to more complementary work, I don't think anybody can beat India in the long run. So these are a few things that I think we absolutely have, and we can do so much. We can be like pioneers and leaders in everything that we try to do. I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely. The kind of energy I'm seeing in this kind of discussion that I'm having with both of you, I'm really, it is totally inspirational. Thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to both of you, and having such people around us. Actually, it makes us more positive and motivated to go a mile ahead and think beyond. So thank you once again for sharing your views on our startup ecosystem and the role that they can play in making our country self-reliant. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah.